if we look at the last one to kind of wrap up last week, this is Hannah. And Hannah is a woman that suffers from infertility, and she went to bat praying to God on behalf of her womb, if you will, asking for the Lord to give her a child. And just like many of us do, she made deals with God. So what was her deal? Does anybody remember what deal she made with the Lord? Perry, what do you think?
If she had a child, that she would dedicate the child to God, and that he would belong.
Exactly. And so she was the woman who dropped to her knees and was praying aloud. And when the high priest saw her praying aloud, he thought she was drunk. Because in those days, she was praying quietly. Because in those days, you were much more vocal. And the fact that she was just so into her prayer, he thought that she was drunk. And really what it taught us is that the Lord hears our heart. So she is kind of a mother of all of us in that regard. Remember, we were saying all these women are mothers to us in some regard. So she was the one that taught us that our prayers are heard because the Lord knows the deepest sorrows of our heart. So she does indeed get pregnant. Did anybody know her son's name? Samuel. And she does indeed give her child to the church. Now, this week I was with Mama Sarah, and I'm bummed that Mama Sarah and Terry aren't here because they were supposed to be. Mama Sarah's son, Samuel, is going to be starting school here. We just enrolled him at Skyline on Friday. And he's staying with Terry McCoy for his high school, and Terry and I are sharing guardianship of this young boy. And the amount of paperwork the school made us do was just absurd. And as we're driving down the highway, Sarah just looked exhausted, and she just yells out, "I am Hannah." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I just gave Samuel to the high priest." I said, "Well, I might be the high priestess." But it felt very similar to that. And she said, I now understand what Hannah must have felt like entrusting her kid to somebody else. The difference is Samuel is 15. This Samuel was probably about 3 when he was given to the high priest to be turned over to be raised. So talk about dedication. So if we look here at what we can learn from Miss Hannah, her name means favor or graciousness. She's provoked by another woman's malice. She refused to respond in kind, so she showed the grace. Instead, she poured out her hurt and sorrow to God, allowing him to vindicate her. Her sorrow is that she was often taunted and misunderstood, so people often made fun of her, thought she was a drunk, like I said. And her joy was to proclaim God's power and goodness in raising the lowly and humbling the proud. So 5 things we may not know about Hannah. Hannah knew how to respond with grace or not respond at all. It says here in 1 Samuel, "Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation." She was describing herself to Eli, that she was his servant, and she basically was saying, don't be so mean, be kind, right? This is what she's saying, but she was kind in the way she asked of it. The second one, Eli the priest asked God to bless Hannah with a child more than once. So on her behalf, Eli interceded, the high priest. So as she went to Eli and said, "Listen, I'm not drunk. I just want this child." And as she showed her soft side, his heart softened as well. And then he went to intercede on her behalf. After Samuel, Hannah had 5 more kiddos. We often don't hear too much about that, but she did. She had 3 sons and 2 daughters. And Hannah was the 4th woman in biblical history to suffer through infertility. So you often hear of that, like that being the biggest woe of the family of the woman when you're barren. And it just shows how in that impossibility, Christ makes things possible. So she was the 4th one. And then Hannah's famous prayer that we talked about, the Song of Hannah, actually is one that prophesied the coming of the Messiah. So that's a very short snippet of Salome and Hannah, and we're going to move on to the 10 women in the Bible who exceeded expectations. And Pastor Jim is going to take over from here. I'm going to just run up and make these copies of the
Sure. You know what? I'm going to pass out some Bibles because I think it'd be fun to be able to look and see what we're going to look at right in the Bible and see these 10 people and see what's happened.
Oh, I'm going to give the sheets as well.
I got more over here too.
There you are.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, so the first book we want to turn to is in the book of Exodus. So we're skipping Genesis. We'll come back to that in a minute.
What's your name?
Oh, yes.
And then these have to be passed out.
Evaluations. Okay. Let me remind I won't see them there, but I'll put them there. All right.
In fact, I think I'll just pass them off now.
Please do.
Okay.
Was James pretty cool?
I don't know.
Well, this is an evaluation for the whole term. Go ahead and pass.
He's reading what his name means.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of words here. I'm trying to find a simple piece. Yeah. Anyway. So let's look at Exodus, and if you're on page I think 126. So I'm around the 15th verse of chapter 1. I guess if I back up to the 13th, which is the very top of that page, on page 126, it says, "The Egyptians became ruthless in imploring tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter and with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them." Ruthless. "The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shipra, and the other Puah, 'When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, she shall live.' But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, 'Why have you done this and allowed the boys to live?' And the midwives said to the Pharaoh, 'Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives come to them. They're strong women.' So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, 'Every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every girl live.'" And that's the backstory to Moses, and why Moses got to be put in the basket, spared, and then was taken into Pharaoh's own home and raised as a child of Pharaoh. There's irony here that a Hebrew child is born now as a son of Pharaoh, as such. But that's how God is laughing at this all. So, here are two women who defied the king, the Pharaoh, and because they feared God. And God worked with them and used them to let the people of Egypt, or the people of Israel, grow strong in the land of Egypt. Okay? So they are. So if you look at the sheet, it says, these women feared God more than the unnamed Pharaoh in Exodus, who could have easily had them killed. They understood sanctity of life, and they knew what they did in God's eyes mattered most. These women were up against a hard choice: follow this new Pharaoh or reap the consequences. They would have been expected to cave into Pharaoh's command to secure their own safety, but they held strong to what they believed and refused to kill the Hebrew children. So, what do you think about that? Have you heard of these two before? We kind of remember that story a little bit, but not exactly their names, I bet.
No, I remember it in generalities and not a specific person.
Right.
I knew the concept, not the
Right.
actual.
Mainly because this is the backstory of setting up the birth of Moses, which chapter 2 is all about, and how Moses then becomes the leader of Israel. But that's the point here, is that there would have been no Moses had it not been these two women who actually followed their faith and fear of God rather than the Pharaoh. All right. Any more about that? Should we move on? Yeah, what time is it? Oh, we got time, so we're not in a big hurry. All right, so let's. The next one is Tamar. Now, this would be considered, I think, MA, mature audiences. This is not PG-13 or even R. This is MA. This is mature audiences only. Back up to Genesis chapter 38. So page 102. This is not the chapter you want to read to your children before you put them to bed. I think we're going to read the whole chapter only because it sets the stage and shows us what we're going to do before we move on. So let's hear about Tamar. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and settled near a certain Edomite whose name was Hira. Then Judah saw the daughters of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He married her and went into her. She conceived and bore a son and named him Again she conceived and bore a son. She named him Onan. Yet again she bore a son and she named him Shelah. She was in Cherzib when she bore him. Judah took a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her. Raise up offspring for your brother." But since Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, he spilled his semen on the ground wherever he went in to his brother's wife, so that he would not give offspring to his brother. What he did was displeasing to the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. Oh my. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he feared that he too would die like his brothers." So Tamar went to live in her father's house. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah's time of mourning was over, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear the sheep," she put off her widow's garment, put on a veil, wrapped herself up, and sat down at the entrance of Enon, which is on the road to Timnah. She saw that Shelah was grown up, yet she had not been given him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He went over to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me, that you may come into me?" He answered, "I will send you a kid from the flock." And she said, "Only if you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and the staff in your hand." So he gave them to her. And went into her. She conceived by him. She got up and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garment of her widowhood. When Judah sent the kid by his friend, Eldamite, to recover the pledge from the woman, he could not find her. He asked the townspeople, "Where is that temple prostitute who was at Enion by the wayside?" But they said, "No prostitute has been here." So he turned to Judah and said, "I've not found her. Moreover, the townspeople said, 'No prostitute has been here.'" And Judah replied, "Well, let her keep the things as her own. Otherwise, we will be laughed at. You see, I sent this kid, and you could not find her." About 3 months later now, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the whore. Moreover, she is pregnant as a result of whoredom." And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "It was the owner of these who made me pregnant." And she said, "Take note, please, whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff." Then Judah acknowledged them and said, "She is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." And he did not lie with her again. When the time came for delivery, there were twins in her womb, and while she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and bound it on his hand, a crimson thread, saying, "This one came out first." But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother. And she said, "What a breach you have made of yourself." Therefore he was named Perez. Afterward his brother came out with a crimson thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. All right. So there's the MA, mature audience only chapter. There's a few of those in the Bible, but there's that one. What do you think about that? If we look on the second page, it says, "How does she exceed expectation?" People have expected Tamar to accept defeat, but instead she stood up for herself. Though it may seem like an odd way to do it, she earned the respect of her father-in-law and continued the family line. Upon realizing what had happened, Judah acknowledged his guilt in keeping his youngest son from Tamar. His acknowledgement not only justified Tamar's unconventional conduct, but it also marked a turning point in his own life. Tamar's son Perez is the ancestor of the royal line of David mentioned in Ruth chapter 4, 18 through 22.
We're missing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You don't have that page?
No, it goes to 6.
Oh, it didn't copy this page 2. I didn't. Pastor Vicky did that one. Sorry about that. She was.
She said she was having trouble with a copier.
Yeah, that must have been it.
Y'all had that.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Well, let's just move on. So, it's kind of odd, but in those days, what we need to know is it became, if your brother's wife died, it was then your duty as the brother to make his line continue, and so you took his wife as yours. So,
Even if you had one?
yeah, it was.
Orthodox Jews, these ultra-Orthodox, still do that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But I don't know if anyone does, other than, I don't know anybody who does that anymore. But it seems really, to our ears and to us.
How did they figure it's going to be your brother's line? It's not.
It's still the male, so.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I know, you and your brother didn't look alike, but you were still your brother's son.
Yeah. Yeah, we all think about that. So evidently, Pastor Vicky, our page 2s didn't print a copy on that page. So.
That doesn't surprise me.
I'm sure.
Here, it's not the same spelling, but I got it.
Well, it goes from 6 to 9 also. We can turn the next page.
Okay. All right. So we're going to do Rahab anyway. We're going to do Rahab next. I think we know about Rahab. This is another of the this is more R-rated, but it's still another one you wouldn't want to read to your children. So we want to look, we want to find her in Joshua chapter 2, in chapter 6 maybe, Joshua.
Okay, I missed what you were saying because I was laughing. Would you please?
Yeah, so we want to find Joshua.
Oh, okay.
Joshua, chapter 2, and then again in chapter 6. So on page 366. 366 to look at in Joshua chapter 2.
Just for fun. We're not going to be quizzed on it at all. I promise. Just for fun.
All right, so let's look here on page 366. Everybody get to chapter 2? Okay. Then Joshua son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab and spent the night there. Isn't it interesting? These guys finally get into the city, and the first place they go is to the prostitute's house. Oh my goodness. The king of Jericho was told, "Some Israelites have come here tonight to search out the land." Then the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come only to search out the whole land." But the women took the 2 men and hid them. Then she said, "True, the men that came to me, but did not know where they came from. And when it was time to close the gate at dark, the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you can overtake them." She had, however, brought them up to the roof, hidden them in the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. So the men pursued them on the way toward Jordan, as far as the fords. As soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before they went to sleep, she came up on top of the roof and said to the men, "I know the Lord has given you the land, and the dread of you fallen on us, and all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of Amorites that were beyond the Jordan, to Shiloh and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no courage left in any of us because of you. The Lord your God is indeed God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, since you have dealt kindly with you, swear to me by the Lord that you in turn will deal kindly with my family. Give me a sign of good faith that you will spare my family and my mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." The men said to her, "Our life for yours. If you do not tell this business of ours, then we will kindly deal and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land." Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the outside of the city wall. She resided within the wall itself. She said to them, "Go toward the hill country, so that the pursuers may not come to you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterwards you may go your way." The men said to her, "We will be released from this oath that you have made us swear to you if we invade the land, and you do not tie this crimson cord to the window through which you let us down, and you do not gather into your house your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family. If any of you go out the doors of your house into the street, they shall be responsible for their own deaths, and we shall be innocent. But if a hand is laid upon any who are with you in the house, we shall bear the responsibility for their death. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be released from this oath that you made us swear to you." She said, "According to your words, so be it." So she sent them away, and they departed. Then she tied the crimson cord in the window. Okay, so they did that, and then if you look in chapter 6, you'll see the result. Chapter 6, verses 22. 371, page 371. Last verse on the bottom. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring the women out of it and all who belong to her house as you swore to her." So the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab along with her father, her mother, her brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out all her kindred and set them outside the camp of Israel. They burned down the city and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessel of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute and her family and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared. Her family has lived in Israel ever since, for she hid the messengers from Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. All right. And then she's certainly mentioned later in the book of Hebrews, book of James, and in the Gospel of Matthew in the lineage of Jesus, because this becomes now the lineage of Jesus once again.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you look, I can read that
The mother of
briefly.
Boaz, isn't she?
Yeah.
Here's the missing backsides. Have a closer look at one. You're missing 2 sheets. Those are the backsides that are missing. So basically the package didn't print the backsides. So I'm giving you your missing backsides.
It's all right. These are MA rated stories anyway. It goes right along there. It all goes with. It started all this morning with the microphones that we had to turn on the microphone. So ever since then. Well, in Matthew it says in Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth. So there is Rahab mentioned in the lineage of Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think about the woman Rahab?
She's a great woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm struck again and again how women in really difficult times, in dark times of great darkness, but they're so resilient, so clever.
Yes.
They had to be extra sly, and and they're just it's really impressive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I like that word, impressive.
Especially in a patriarchal society.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Clever because he never.
Oh, for the sheets at the end, we actually have writing utensils. That's good. Okay. Let's look at Jehosheba. Let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 11. That would be on, let's see if I can find it here. 6:10 and 6:11. I guess on 6:11. All right. So we look at chapter 11 there. It says, "Now when Athaliah, Ahaziah's mother, saw that her son was dead, she went about to destroy all the royal family. But Jehosheba, King Joram's daughter, Ahaziah's sister, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's children who were about to be killed. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Thus she hid him from Athaliah, so that he was not killed. He remained with her 6 years, hidden in the house of the Lord, while Athaliah reigned over the land." Yeah, wow. So there is how she is. She takes away the young her infant nephew and keeps him safe. He becomes the only survivor of the massacre, and then in 2 Chronicles 22 we read more about that. And her husband Jehoiada was a priest, reinstated little Joashon to the throne, and it was through her bravery then. As a defying aunt, that the royal line of David was preserved. So here again is a woman keeping the line of David and Jesus preserved by being kind of, ruthless in the sense, in conniving and just being smart, making it happen, being really brave.
Her name means swear by his name.
All right. There's an asterisk here that says the sad part of this story is that later, after the death of Jehoiada and likely Jehoshaphat, King Joash remembered not their kindness and put their son, the prophet Zechariah, to death. So it's not all roses. I mean, there isn't, well, I did a good thing, you do a good thing for me. It doesn't always happen. Right? All right. Well, we're in 2 Kings. Turn to chapter 22. So on page 630. Right, hold on. All right. So let's look at this. So Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedediah, daughter of Abadiah of Bozachatha. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord and walked in all the ways of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right or to the left. So then it talks about in the 8th year of the king, Josiah. So he's only, if he was 8th year, so he's only 16 now, just able to drive. The king sent this Saphron, son of A, son of M, the secretary, to the house of the Lord, saying, "Go up to the high priest Hilkiah and give him count the entire sum of money that was been brought into the house of the Lord, which the keepers of the threshold have collected from the people. Let it be given into the hand of the workers who have the oversight of the house of the Lord. Let them give it to the workers who are in the house of the Lord for repairing the house. That is, to the carpenters, to the builders, to the masons, and let them use it to buy timber and quarried stone to repair the house. But no accounting shall be asked for them for the money that is delivered into their hands, for they deal honestly." Now the high priest, Hilkiah, said to Shaphan, the secretary, "I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord." When Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, he read it. Then Shaphan, the secretary, came to the king and reported to the king, "Your servants have emptied out the money that was found in the house, and they have delivered it into the hand of the workers who have oversight over the house of the Lord." Then Shaphan, the secretary, informed the king, "The priest Hilkiah has given me a book." Shaphan then read it aloud to the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes, and the king commanded the priest Hilkiah, Acham, the son of Shaphan, Achabor, son of Michael, Shaphan, the secretary, and the king's servant, Ashiah, saying, "Go inquire of the Lord for me, for the people, for all Judah, concerning the words of this book, so that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord, and that is kindled against us, because our ancestors did not obey the words of this book, and do according to all that is written concerning us." So the priest, Hilkiah, Acham, Achabar, Shaphan, and Ashiah, went to the prophet, Huldah. Here we go. Here we go. Went to the prophetess Huldah, the wife of Shalom, son of Teklah, son of Harphas, keeper of the wardrobe. See that wardrobe, just like in the movies. She resided in Jerusalem in the second quarter, where they consulted her. She declared to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, tell the man who sent you to me, thus says the Lord, I will indeed bring disaster on this place and all of its inhabitants. All the words of the book that belong, the book that the king of Judah has read, because they have abandoned me and have made offerings to other gods, so they have provoked me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath will be kindled against this place, and it shall not be quenched. But as to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire to the Lord, thus you shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, regarding the words that you have heard, because your heart was penitent, and you humbled yourself before the Lord, when you heard how I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and because you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I also have heard you, says the Lord. Therefore I will gather you to your ancestors, and you shall be gathered to your graves in peace. Your eyes shall not see all the disaster that I will bring to this place." They took the message back to the king. Well, it takes a lot to stand up and pronounce judgment as well as good news, right? All right, we got a couple minutes yet. I want to keep moving. Unless there's anything about that. Notice that this is a woman who is a prophetess.
How unusual was that?
Only because the men didn't talk about it or write it down, but it could have been very normal. But remember, this is a patriarchal society, and the men are writing the book.
It's actually kind of amazing there's any women mentioned at all.
Absolutely.
So
And the fact that she pronounced judgment, it's amazing they wrote that down. Only because it probably came true.
Probably because the wife was behind him saying, "Do it."
Yeah. All right. Let's get some couple of New Testament. So turn to the book of Acts chapter 16. Page 1824. (1824). And this is Lydia, and we're going to read about her conversion. So let's see, we'll start a little bit above and get some context. Verse 11. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, and the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. This is Paul talking. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the woman who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us, for she was from the city of Thyatira, and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. Okay? What do you think it means that she was a worshiper of God?
She prayed a lot. She led prayer groups, maybe.
She was a believer.
A believer. But she's only being baptized now, so she wasn't a Christian. So, a worshiper of God, it does have a capital G, so we're assuming that she was probably Jewish in some ways. Okay? Alright? What's that?
and wealthy. She was purple dyes.
Purple cloth, purple dyes, very wealthy. Mm-hmm. And here she is offering hospitality right away to the missionaries. She must have heard John the Baptist. Share. Okay. Look at how she exceeded expectations. That paragraph there on this sheet that you have. I know it's kind of hard to move back and forth, but I want to read this one paragraph. Lydia, this is how she exceeded expectations. Lydia was part of a group that met for prayer by the river. They did not have a synagogue, as synagogues required at least 10 Jewish men. Being a seller of purple cloth, she would have been wealthy. Yet, she humbled herself, offering hospitality to others. Luke mentions Lydia by name, noting her importance in this record of history. Notice that no wonder she was a worshiper of God, because it could only be a congregation by the number of men
Yes.
that were in the congregation. Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, that's a groan.
It's kind of like in the and they in the Gospels, when they describe there's a crowd, they're saying how many men, not women and children, right? Feeding the 5,000 men, and women and children would have been extra on top of that. That's the miraculous of it all. Okay. We're in Acts. Turn to Romans 16, 3 and 4. We'll look at Priscilla very quickly, one of them. References.
Her name means worthy. Lydia's name just meant the region she was from. It doesn't have a fun meaning.
So this Priscilla, also known as Prisca, was a Jewish woman of Rome who converted to Christianity. Some may point out that she was always mentioned with her husband and never on her own. However, they're always shown as equals in Christ, and the two of them together are remembered as leaders of the early church. And so if we look at verses 3 and 4 in chapter 16, Paul greets, I greet Prisca and Aquila, who work with me in Christ Jesus and who risk their necks for my life, to whom not only I give thanks, but also all the church of the Gentiles. So there they are. And again, they're in Acts 18. They're referred to as tent makers like Paul. Paul was a tent maker. That's how he earned his living. He would make tents.
Bivocational.
Yep, bivocational. And then back, here it is, and you can find their strength. If you look back in Acts chapter 18, here they are again. I'm sorry to back you up. I should have went there first. But in chapter 18, verses 3 thereabouts, there is Aquila. Where is that one that I just saw? And it talks about, an Apollo, ministry of Apollos. And it's here that on page 1830. Page 1830. So it's the top of that page. So Apollos has been doing his ministry. Now there came to Ephesus a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria. He was an eloquent man, well versed in the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord. He spoke with burning enthusiasm and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogues. But when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained the way of God to him more accurately. And when he wished to cross over to Achaia, the believers encouraged him, and he wrote to the disciples to welcome him. So there they are. This is a woman and a man, her husband, explaining the way of God more accurately to an evangelist. They had to be. He didn't have all the knowledge he needed yet to get that right.
But he must have had some levels of trust so that in all these characters, when they speak out against those who knew, they must have had a level of trust with them as people listen to them.
Yeah.
This is just an interesting from the book that we have been looking at. It says, the fact that her name appears alongside her husband's every time does tell us something. She was a valued disciple, one who made a difference in Paul's life and in her world. So whatever your role as a woman is in your church, whether in the background or in leadership, you can be sure that what you're doing matters. Each task, no matter how large or small, is important to the spreading of the gospel. You're an integral part of your church community, and God promises to use you. So that's why we study these women, right?
Right.
As an inspiration to duplicate their kind of actions, we can do the same.
Absolutely.
To inspire us.
I got just a couple minutes, but I want to do two quick things before we take time to do the final evaluation. On page 1872, turn to 1872, and I want to look at chapter 16 in the book of Romans. So if you got the blue book, it's 1872. And if you look at chapter 16, you'll get some personal greetings here. And this is Phoebe. I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church at Cenchreae, so that you may welcome her in the Lord as is fitting for the saints, and help her in whatever she may require from you. For she has been a benefactor of many and of myself as well. Please greet Prisca and Aquila. There it is. There, we saw that before. So there they is too. But here is Phoebe, a deacon of the church. Yeah, wow is right. Yeah, that's big. Very much so. Okay? And you want to get even bigger? Turn to Matthew 28. So back up to the Gospels. Yep. Yep, 1658. And you'll see right away in chapter 28, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Sunday, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And the angel of the Lord descending from heaven came and rolled back the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, his clothing was white as snow. For fear of him, the guard shook and became like dead men. But the angel of the Lord said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised. As he said, come see the place where he lay, then go quickly and tell his disciples. He has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him. This is my message for you." So the woman left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples.
Is the other Mary the sister of Lazarus?
No, actually, it's actually the mother of James. So Salome is called Mary as well.
Okay.
So that's the other Mary.
Okay?
Too many Marys.
There are a lot of Marys.
A very generic title.
Names that just change partway through, too.
Yes, they do. And then again in Luke, there's also in Luke the same, where it includes Johanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women. So that's where that's declined. But anyway, there is the friend. The women are the ones who get to see and hear about the resurrection announcement long before the other disciples.
So, as a theologian yourself, and pastor, this is a question that's always fascinated me, which is, was it just accidental because they happened to be the ones who traditionally would go to the tomb that they were first told? Or it seems like Christ was so powerful that he could have told his disciples first.
Sure, could have. Could have
Given
appeared.
vision first.
Absolutely.
So what is being said here?
Well, I think part of it is that the announcement always goes to the least and the last and the lost. Think about the shepherds. Right? Think about the wise men, who's all coming when Jesus is birthed. Here it is at the resurrection, the same thing. And this has to do with witnessing, because women were not allowed in the court of law to be witnesses. Only men were witnesses in the court of law. And so here are women being told this good news to go and be these witnesses. God is lifting up women to the level that the society refused to give them.
So always it was the ordinary that the most extraordinary happened in, right?
Yeah.
So think of Mary being the mother of Jesus. So if you look throughout the Bible, it's in the unexpected places where you find God. And that's why we, as people today, can know God's coming to us in our ordinary lives. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being part of our class.
Is there an evaluation?
Oh, they've been passed out.
They've
Okay.
been passed
Does
out.
anybody need a pencil or something like that?
We all got one.
Anybody need a writing instrument? Anybody need a writing instrument?
Somebody's going to take yours.
I know.
Would you be willing to go over to shut off my other TV? Sure. I gotta run upstairs.
Yep.
I don't want to go back there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes? It's okay, you're on it. No big deal, Jenny.